Hello and welcome to the Doof Book Club, our monthly live stream discussion of a book chosen by you, our listeners. My name is Matt Ferryman, and I'm joined as always by the clone of a Dark Jedi, Scott Daly.
Hello, Matt. My existence will definitely pay off in this book.
Now, just to be clear, that's Daly with two A's, right?
Yes.
Yeah, good.
They do really spell the names in this Star Wars shit. Like, just a hair different for no reason at all.
Yeah, it's a plot point. He's not Joris Sabayoth, he's Joris Sabayoth.
I laughed out loud. I did.
Hello,
everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I hope you're all having a wonderful Friday evening and a wonderful new year. I'm sure we know a lot of the folks in the chat. I see a lot of familiar faces, some I haven't seen in a long time. So hello and welcome. If you happen to be joining us for the very first time, welcome. We are Doof Media, and we make podcasts all about the stories we love. We also arrange and organize this monthly book club. Matt, please, for the listeners, explain what a book club is.
Each month, Scott and I select 5 books from a pool submitted to us by our wonderful Doof community. We put up a poll for all of the supporters on Patreon at patreon.com/Doof Media, and we let them vote on which they'd like us to talk about. The book with the most votes wins, and then we all read it.
And then we meet here on the first Friday of the month. I used to say the last Friday and then make a joke about how that was wrong every month, but I'm just going to say the first Friday now, because that seems like just when our book club is now. It's the first Friday of the next month. We spend an hour or so chatting all about the book. We interact with you folks in chat and just talk. We just want to, this is not like a formal analysis, right? Like, it's not like, it's just us having fun chatting about a book for an hour and a half. I think that's all we want it to be.
Yeah, we have fun here.
We do have some quick homework for everyone, though, because one of the other things we do is our patrons, as Matt said, get to vote on the book, but we also let everyone that attends live an opportunity to vote for the book as well. So we will add this poll that I am putting in the chat right this very minute to our results of our already completed Patreon poll. We'll add those together, and then we'll figure out what next month's book is going to be. So this will be open throughout the show. We'll close it right before the end, and we'll see what we're going to be reading next month. But next month is for next month, and right now is for Star Wars. Matt, what is this month's book?
This month's book is Star Wars: Heir to the Empire by Tomothy Zahn.
Oh my gosh.
And the summary is as follows. I'm not going to read all this. It is a time of renewal, 5 years after the destruction of the Death Star and the defeat of Darth Vader and the Empire. But with the war seemingly won, strains are beginning to show in the Rebel Alliance. New challenges to galactic peace have arisen, and Luke Skywalker hears a voice from the past. A voice with a warning. Beware the dark side. I will stop there. It's good stuff. It's good stuff.
Did that happen in the book?
You talking? I think that's when Obi-Wan comes to him in a dream toward the very beginning of the book.
Oh, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's close enough. Yeah.
All right. So, Matt, this is a Star Wars book, and I think this is gonna be one of those conversations where I think it's actually pretty important for us to like talk about our history with Star Wars in general, and perhaps the expanded universe, or now what they're calling the Legends Collect. I don't even know what Disney's calling this stuff now, but I think it's important that we kind of establish a baseline of this stuff, because I think this matters, especially when it comes to this stuff. So what is Star Wars to you? What is your history with Star Wars in general, and these books, this expanded universe at large?
You know, you can usually answer this question by just saying your age. So, like, as an elder millennial, the only real Star Wars movies are the original trilogy. And that's relevant to me here because, you know, for years and years of my childhood, there was only the original trilogy. For my entire childhood, there was only the original trilogy. And then there started to be a very, very few novels in the expanded universe. And they were amazing because you just wanted to know, what are Luke and Han and Leia going to get up to next? And that's exactly what this book is. And I read this book when I was a kid, and I remember really liking it. It's part of the reason why I think I suggested it be put on the poll, actually. And or at least somebody else suggested it, and I said, hey, that would be fun. And just so, like, historically speaking, there was a period of time when people were so desperate for Star Wars, and this was maybe not literally the first, but one of the first things that whet people's appetite for Star Wars, which is insatiable apparently.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. My history with Star Wars is similar to yours. Like, as a kid, I watched the original movies. As a How old were we? 13-year-old when the prequel trilogy came out. I watched that movie and loved it because I was a 13-year-old, and then episode 2 came out and I was like, eh.
Yeah.
Then episode 3 came out and I was like, eh. And then I realized that the first one wasn't that good either. But I have never read any books in any expand. No, I've read the novelization of The Phantom Menace because I was 13 and just very excited about all this new Star Wars stuff. But I'd never read any expanded universe. I had played the N64 Rogue Squadron game, and then the N64 adaptation of what was that called? I'm blanking on it now.
You're talking about
Shadows
Shadows of the Empire.
Yeah, Shadows of the Empire. So I played those games, and then I played various of the game. But like expanded universe stuff was not my bag. I just never really got into that very much.
Well, that's a shame, Scott, because the novelization of Shadows of the Empire was extremely horny.
I thought the game made me want to read that book, but I don't think I ever did. And I never beat the game either because I feel like that game was really hard. I was not very good at video games at whatever age I was when that game came out. But yeah, I mean, I would say like it's not that Star Wars like wasn't important to me. Obviously, I loved those 3 movies and I watched them a lot. But like to me, Star Wars was just the original trilogy. Like that's what it was for me as a kid. Like that's it. Like and I was like, oh, I like these 3 movies, and that's all my time with it that I was interested in having. So this was a new experience for me. And frankly, I came into it with pretty low expectations. I don't know why. Just like I think part of it is just my feelings about Star Wars in 2024 are rather complicated now. I don't like almost everything to do with Star Wars these days. And so I just like, I have a chip on my shoulder about these kind of things. But so I think we interestingly come to this book from very different places, which is pretty fascinating actually.
And I mean, I think it's also fascinating that like I have a variety of friends who are a variety of ages, and it's like depending on whether you were born 1985, 1990, 1995, 1980, you'll have like totally different perspective on Star Wars as an object. And I just think that's fascinating. Like there are people who love the prequels, who grew up with the prequels. For them, the prequels are Star Wars. There are people like us for whom the prequels are sort of blasphemous. There are people who love the like cartoons that came on after the prequels. And for them, like that's the heart of Star Wars. I think that's really interesting. I pretty much seriously think that like in 3,000 years, people will be talking about Star Wars still. It'll just be, regarded as sort of like a myth or something from the ancient world, and I just think that's interesting because much like the mythic, pantheons of the gods, like it is actually already something that has evolved and morphed over time. So that's,
no, you're right.
That's just interesting.
It is really interesting, like watching this upswell of prequel love from the generation that like was little kids when they watched those movies and fell in love with those movies just like we fell in love with the original movies. And it's this really fascinating little thing. Turning our attention to this book in particular, Matt, on this reread, what did you think? And while you answer that question, Matt, I want you folks in chat, did you read the book again for the book club, or is this just a book that you've had on rotation forever? What'd you think of the book?
Yeah, so I remembered like really loving it, and so I have to say I was a little let down because I did not find it to be as utterly delightful and charming as I did as a 10-year-old or whatever, like realistically, maybe 11. That said, I had a fun time with it. Like there were specific things that I thought were fun, and then there were certain things that I kind of just like gave me a good chuckle because I was like, just due to the way they sort of clash with the direction Star Wars has gone in. and then there were certain things where I was like, this is not my favorite. I think my favorite part was, and I think you probably agree with me on this more or less, is like you get to watch the continuing adventures of Luke Skywalker, which some small part of our child heart wanted to see. You know, like that's what I wanted out of Star Wars as a child, was like, I want to see what happens next with
Yeah.
Luke and Han and Leia. That's that's what I care about. That's desperately what I want to see, and that's what this book provides. I think like Kirk says in the chat, the consequence of that is that it verges into feeling like fan fiction in places. Um, just points out that it kind of is fan fiction. I mean,
Yeah.
once you start expanding upon an IP, then it's like, well, what's the line exactly? It's like, it's basically just like, is it sanctioned?
Yeah.
It is, but it's like, personally for me, it's basically the kind of fan fiction that I always wanted, so I don't really mind that so much.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
that's my overall feelings. There's lots of little things we can go into, obviously.
Yeah, and we're going to, and I have a lot I want to talk about this book, and I think this book has done a really interesting thing for me that I think has helped me kind of understand the difference between me and like the people out there that I see like absolutely despise The Last Jedi and everything it stands for. I think this book has helped me understand those people a little bit better. I think my overall feeling here is I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. Like I
Mhm.
said, I came in with pretty low expectations, and it met those.
Mhm.
So like damning with faint praise, I guess. But like I was definitely entertained through a large portion of this book. It's a pretty quick and easy read. Like it doesn't take a lot of time. It doesn't take a lot of effort. I just kind of breezed through it in a few days. And I had this really interesting thing that was happening to me. You said like the continuing adventures of Luke Skywalker, and I agree with you. At 10 years old, if I had like rolled out of Return of the Jedi and picked up this book, I would have been like, "Fuck yeah, more of this shit. I love it." At 38 years old, I don't care about Luke, Leia, and Han anymore, and I don't need to see the continuing adventures of them. And this weird thing happened to me while reading this book, where like whenever we got into the new characters like Thrawn and even the Card, I think is how you pronounce his
Yeah,
name. I don't
Talon
even know.
Card,
Yeah.
badass name, right?
Um, when we got on these new characters, I was like, I was in and I was on board, and I was like, yeah, this is interesting stuff. I like what we're doing here. And then like, man, we went back to Luke, Leia, and Han, and it felt like fan fiction to me. It like there's moments in this book where like you can tell that there was like a mandate of like people loved Return or Empire Strikes Back. Do that again. Luke goes back to Dagobah and he splits away from Han and Leia, and they're going not to Cloud City this time, but they're going to another establishment that's run by Lando. And like it's just there's moments where you could tell they're like intentionally like re-hitting beats. And yeah, this is the same thing that the Disney Star Wars movies did, right? Like it is very much like there's all these moments where they like wink at you with like lines from the movies, and you're like, remember that line? You remember it? You remember
Yeah,
it, Scott? You remember that line? You didn't
yeah,
forget that, did you? And like that's the kind of thing where like now in the world that we exist in right now, where I'm just like, oh, but like I can totally see a little kid that like all they have of Star Wars is those three movies, and they're desperate for more, being like, yeah, he said it, and like being really genuinely excited about that
yeah.
stuff.
I mean, okay, so one thing I want to say is like, I genuinely think this book does a better job at all of that stuff than the new Disney trilogy.
Fair.
Like,
Yeah.
like I'm not saying it does a perfect job, and it is just literally fan service, like that's what it is. But like, I think it's like more deserved and fun in here than it even is in the new Disney films, which are, you know, massive productions involving billions of dollars. So
Hmm.
I think, again, it's like this is again sort of backhanded praise, but it's like, hey, at least it's better than these new films that we got that, are just broadly extremely disappointing. Um, yeah, apparently this was like the first Star Wars fiction to come out after, Jedi.
Hmm.
I was just looking this up, which I think that makes sense to me, because I remember it being like a huge deal. This particular book being like, oh my god, and there was almost a feeling of, at the time, especially when you're a kid and you don't have this concept of like fiction isn't real, it was like, oh, this is what happens next,
Yeah. Yeah.
like actually. Whereas my brain now, I watch the new Disney movies and I'm just like, yeah, that didn't happen. That's not real. um, um, so that's just
Yeah.
that's just fun. That's just an interesting piece of historical trivia. And these characters that were introduced, like Mara Jade goes on to be like a fixture of the expanded universe. I mean,
Yeah, I
she,
was spoiled on
yeah,
what happened to her because I googled her name and I saw the last name at the end of her name and I was like, oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, right. And you can kind of see how that's set up in this book, right?
Sure. Yeah.
I'm honestly slightly surprised that you didn't already know that, because we were talking earlier and I was like, and of course you know what ends up happening with Mara Jade, and you were like, I don't,
I had no idea who this person was
Yeah,
until I read this book.
yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, expanded universe, completely ignorant, like
Yeah.
100%.
One not super related to what we were just talking about, but one thing I really liked about the audiobook. Well, first of all, it's a great audiobook. I'll just say that. They work in the music like quite pervasively, and the guy they've got doing the reading, he just had such great voices where like for Han and Luke and Lando and even Wedge, he would just like contort his voice and it would just sound like Harrison Ford and Mark Hamill.
Oh wow.
It was great. I've never really had an audiobook do quite that thing before. I guess partly because you rarely read a story where it's like supposed to be mimicking characters who you know really well. But that's definitely what this was, and I felt like I felt like I was hearing Luke talk. Right, it really worked on me actually.
I wonder if that would have helped you better because one of my main complaints with this book actually, and I think part of the reason why I bounced off of the old character so much is they didn't really feel like I didn't notice this until about halfway through where I was like, oh, like when I'm reading a section from Luke's perspective, I'm not like seeing Luke Skywalker in my mind's eye or whatever. I'm seeing a character that exists in this book named Luke Skywalker, but like I wasn't doing this thing where I was like, oh, this is Han. This is like I see Harrison Ford. I can imagine Harrison Ford saying these things and doing these things, and Carrie Fisher. Like that just wasn't happening. They were just like to me, they were just like different characters that happen to have those same characters' names and some of the same personality traits. And I don't know, like I don't know why that is. Like I was really trying to think about this and see like is it just did Zahn just not nail the characters here? And I'm not confident enough saying that. But I definitely noted it was a thing that was happening. Is that there was nothing here that I was like, oh yeah, that's my Luke Skywalker. I don't even know if I have a
Yeah.
Luke Skywalker, but that like I don't know. I don't know.
No, I'll go even further and say, like, while I do feel like he got Luke Skywalker, I don't feel like he got Han. Like, and I just don't feel like the character in this book acted the way Han would act. I kind of do second guess myself on that though, because I say, Han in Return of the Jedi kind of doesn't act like Han either, because he gets all domesticated, and he kind of starts, he calms down so much between the first movie and the third one that it's like, yeah, okay, fine, maybe this is the way Han would behave after 5 years after the Battle of Endor, and he's got Leia knocked up and everything, and perhaps he would be turned into this guy. It's just like I guess I don't have a huge problem with it. It's not that it rationally doesn't make sense; it's that it just doesn't feel right to me.
Yeah, it's almost like I know this makes terrible podcast content, but it is difficult for me to put to words exactly why I feel this way. But like it was just something I noticed while I was going through the books, is that I just didn't have any kind of familiar attachment to any of these characters on an emotional level. Obviously, intellectually, like I know, oh, this is like it just like emotionally that never happened.
Mm-hmm.
One of the other things that I think is really interesting that this book does, and we'll get into Thrawn here in a second, obviously, because we have to, but it's something that you said, and I think when you said this to me, we were talking earlier this week, it kind of unlocked the whole thing for me, is that Timothy Zahn made this into science fiction. And what we mean by that is that he tried to actually like put work into explaining some of this stuff in more detail than the movies ever do, explaining how some of this technology works and the details of it. And he put a lot of work into the detail of that. That makes it very distinctly at this, like this book is the same time like very, very like in love with Star Wars, but also it is trying to do something different. And the reason why that stood out to me so much is like I was like, oh, maybe I understand now all the people that got like really bent out of shape by the Holdo maneuver in The Last Jedi. Cause like they read a bunch of expanded universe books that turned Star Wars into actual science fiction and not just fantasy with very little sci-fi stuff in it at all. If you live in this expanded universe for this much time, and this is me assuming that they're all like this, like Star Wars becomes something a little bit different than just those three movies were, and so that's what your expectation is when you go see some new Star Wars movies. So I just thought that was really interesting, and it's not like I'm not saying that Zahn made a bad choice by like saying, hey, I'm gonna spend some time on the sci-fi of this whole thing. It is different.
Yeah. But it feels like a different direction things could have gone in. I have read some amount. I've read this whole trilogy and I've read a couple other Star Wars books, but I wouldn't say that I'm the most educated about the expanded universe. But I see this as like one possible branch of the evolutionary tree that could have been, or of what could have existed, but seemingly hasn't, where Star Wars becomes more sci-fi and less space fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
There's whole sequences in here like Luke escaping from the jail cell by using the power pack in his hand,
Yeah,
where
yeah,
it's like legitimate like plot points hinging upon engineering and like technical details, and like R2 has to respool a wire that's part of the hyperdrive system, and
uh-huh,
there's all,
uh-huh.
and like it's kind of fun because it's classic sort of adventure storytelling in the sense of throwing up obstacles and complications and then having the characters have to figure their way around them, and that's always fun to watch, especially if you're like into the characters and the drama is
Yeah.
working on you, which usually was actually, especially with Luke. I think just overall Luke, I found Luke's through line of the story to be the most compelling part. So that's probably why I'm going to talk about Luke the most in this conversation, honestly. But yeah, I like that stuff. It reminded me kind of a little bit of The Martian. It's not nearly as uh tight as The Martian, obviously, and it's trying to be a fun space adventure with
Mm-hmm.
sci-fi elements, but it's like the science and engineering problem solving is just fun to me, and it's fun to me to imagine like if they had gone more in that direction. But yeah, it's just I think that's the kind of thing that kind of makes it feel more grounded too, where it's not even necessarily the fact that it's science fiction, it's the fact that the characters are grappling with these sort of quite small scale problems. It's
Sure.
really a very small scale book, actually. I mean, like the trilogy, I know where the trilogy goes. The trilogy does not stay small scale, but this book itself is sort of just a little adventure that our characters go on. There's
Yeah, I
some
mean,
twists and turns, and there's some creatures trying to kill him, and um,
the climax is them on the planet really
mhm,
like escaping, and technically the battle in space happens, but like our central characters aren't too involved in that, other than a couple like fights with TIE fighters and then destroying all the mole machines,
mhm,
which I guess there are moles in Star Wars, folks. It's official. If you're gonna
yep.
have a mole machine, then you have a mole.
Oh, canonically, there's also chocolate, and that was in the book. This is chocolate in the Star Wars universe.
Yep, yep.
Um, there's somebody, Carson pointed out the idea that uh, I'm going to riff in a direction. I don't know if this is what you intended, Carson, but just that like um, the book chooses to kind of deal with the fact that the Force is number one, extremely ill defined, and number two, kind of intrinsically broken
Broken, yeah.
a- as a power set, by just being like, all right, there's this thing called Isla Mary, and we're just going to kind of dribble them everywhere. And it means that Luke can't use the Force in 95% of circumstances throughout this book. And we don't have to talk about this problem anymore at the end.
Yeah,
Um,
it's an inelegant solution, but it is a solution to a problem that is, if Luke has full force powers the entire time, there's absolutely zero drama to any of this. And so like, I don't know, we'll just like invent the thing and it hangs some trees and it does force bubble push. Like there, I will say there's a lot of this stuff that gets a little silly to me, and it is kind of ironic considering I agree with you. This is a much more grounded, smaller story. This is like there are galaxy wide stakes, but most of this is just what the stuff the characters are dealing with. But like, yeah, I thought those were silly. I kind of, maybe this is just aging me, but like I kind of thought the reason the Empire was so good is because the Emperor was using force powers to troop micromanage in battles. I kind of thought that thing was really silly, actually. And I'm kind of glad. Assuming it will play a much bigger role in the books to come, but I'm kind of glad that was really just a setup for future plot points and not really focused on. I also thought like, I don't know, it's like it's the clone of a dark Jedi. That was a little silly to me. It's just like a lot of the stuff that is, it's not even really the science fiction stuff, but just like putting work into expanding upon certain things that I don't know if I needed expanded upon. That just some of it made me laugh out loud. The thing that made me laugh out loud the most though was when Thrawn took out his megaphone disc, which is like just they basically Timothy Zahn just called it a space megaphone, and that's hilarious.
Uh-huh.
That's absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that actually feels like a space TV or a space megaphone in
Yeah,
this book, which is
yeah,
actually I found often charming and not like annoying. I was just like, yeah, sure. I mean, Star Wars is kind of campy. Star Wars has always been kind of campy. And you've got the like household items with a coat of paint, and then they put them in the background of the scene. That's like a meme about Star Wars in general.
yeah, yeah.
So why not? Sure, he's got a space megaphone.
I I think people are talking about the clone thing, and I think my problem with the clone thing specifically is I just didn't get why we were doing it, and
Mhm.
this is, I think this is a problem with the book as a whole, and it's not really a fair problem to levy against it. Is that this is very clearly the first book in a trilogy, like very clearly, like there is so much stuff set up and briefly talked about in this book that does not even come close to paying off. And so like when you get scenes like but that's not really that person, he's actually just the clone of that person, and my reaction is just like, okay,
Yeah,
what do I do with that information? Like
right.
that means nothing to me. Like that doesn't change my interaction with him at all, actually. I am assuming you're going to make me care about that at some point in the future, but it's not in this book. And that there's a lot of that going on. Like I think Luke has an interesting journey in this book, but definitely like everything going on with him and the Force is like just very very briefly set up. Like there's a couple moments here and there where like Luke is like thinking to himself like, I wonder if doing this is like a thing a Jedi should be doing, and it's just like there's no payoff for that at all in this novel. And again, like, is that a fair critique to levy against it? No, because like I know it's the first of 3 books and I can make assumptions that this stuff will become more important in the other books. But at the same time, this was the book I was reading, and like I literally, when I like, so I read this on Kindle, and like it says the percentage complete, and I hit 94%, turn the next page, and then it said end, the book
Uh-huh.
was over, and I just audibly out loud just went, oh,
Yeah,
because like I just was like it just ends. There
yeah,
is like it is, there is no attempt at any kind of like wrap up. It just ends almost mid sentence.
yeah. No,
And
that's true. No,
yeah, so I don't know. I don't know.
no argument from me there. I mean, I feel it's I honestly think 90% of the like fondness I have for this series is memories of stuff that happens in like the third book, probably.
Hmm.
um which makes sense because everything gets wrapped up, right?
Sure.
You hit all the dramatic high points there, so that's where I would remember the best parts being.
Yeah. I think the struggle I'm having right now is like I enjoyed this book. I had fun reading it, but like did I have enough fun that like the second we get off this call tonight, I'm going to go grab the next two and read them to get the resolution to all this stuff. I just don't know if I care enough to do that. Like as much as I enjoyed my time with it, like I look at my to be read list, and this would be at the very bottom of that list if it got on there, you know? So like, and that's, I don't know. It's like, again, I want to say it wasn't a bad book. I felt it was entertaining. We have some specific character stuff that we need to talk about
Yeah.
here in a bit, but you know, it was good. It was good.
Yeah.
It wasn't great.
I want to riff on something Mario says here in the chat, which is like the EU ruined Star Wars for them, because now the movies aren't going to be as good as the books, and it's like I'm just going to return to, I guess, to something I said a bit ago, like, okay, so yeah, this book uses the concept of clones, and it uses the concept of clones a lot more in the later books of the trilogy. I unironically think the way this book uses clones is like more fun and better and more logical than either the way we use clones in the prequels, or I forgot his name, the guy, the emperor is a clone, and
Oh my
what
god,
the shriveled guy, what's the shriveled guy's name, the other guy?
I keep wanting to say Zork.
Monster face man.
Snoke. It's Snoke.
Like it's and I'm not even saying it's like, oh, it's genius, Scott, you're missing out, the book's genius. It's like, no, it's just like, you hear that there's something called the Clone Wars, and you know that there's this concept that cloning is a thing in the Star Wars universe, and then it's 1990, 5, and you're like, what do I do with that? Like, where do I take that?
Mm-hmm.
And you come up with something that's actually kind of fun and kind of creative, and then you do that in this book, and then like so like I literally feel like kind of fun and kind of creative ends up being better than what we actually got in the later movies. And that's it's the third time I'm going to say damning with faint praise, but like it is like, and like you said earlier, like this helps you understand maybe why certain people were so disappointed in the later movies, because it's like, people didn't do a horrible job with this EU material. Like you could have just copied it and it would have been fine, but instead you made these utterly garbage movies. So anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, the clone stuff, you're so right. I think George Lucas himself like made the most boring possible interpretation of what the Clone Wars was. Like, you think like it's such a fun evocative name of something to throw in the middle of that first movie. It was like, I fought with your father in the Clone Wars, and you as a kid is immediately like, what? What's a Clone War? That sounds awesome. And turns out, well, it's just this war we fought, and then one of the side was clones. Yeah. So that's it.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah. We interpreted it to be a thing we could do so that the wars wouldn't have any consequences, and which is always really good storytelling.
Yeah. Just some clones versus some robots.
Yeah. Putties versus Foot Clan.
No. So yeah. I mean, I think that is definitely something that I will give this book a lot of props for, is that Zahn, like, it's hard for me, again, reading this book now with just the breadth of Star Wars that we have in existence now. And it's tough to like really think back and put myself in the position of, this guy had basically nothing, and he came up with a bunch of cool shit that takes place in this universe. Like, I mean, we saw the Wookiee planet Kashyyyk in the prequels, right? Mm-hmm. But like, that didn't exist until this guy wrote about it, right? And he's like, oh, what are we gonna do with the, and like they got him climbing up the trees, and like that's cool shit, actually. I think a lot of my problems with this book like is sometimes like the beat to beat plot stuff where I'm just like, but like a lot of the ideas are really cool. And that I think is a great transition to our main man, Grand Admiral Thrawn, who is one of the only, I think, characters from the stuff that has crossed over into present day Star Wars, poorly, by the way, badly. But this character is really great, and it actually made me hate Ahsoka even more because they did such a bad job with this character. Like, here's the perfect example for me. This book immediately shows you why Thrawn is scary. Like within like 3 pages of you reading this book, like it demonstrates here's why you should be afraid of this guy, because he's completely outnumbered by this rebel force. He Republic force. How to use the phrases correctly.
Yeah.
And just his knowledge of strategy and knowledge of cultures, and like he just like I think you described him as Sherlock Holmes, and that's exactly what he is, right? The book demonstrates the power of that right away, and then you're like, oh shit, I'm in. I'm totally in. And then they have the other captain ask the question that he asked himself over and over again throughout this book, which is like, what if this guy had been in charge of the Battle of Endor? And like, that's such a fascinating little brainworm to put in your head, and it's really good. And then like the show takes this guy. I swear to God, I'm not going to spend this entire episode ripping on Ahsoka from here on out. But like the show takes this guy and like gives you no reason. Like it just tells you over and over again how scary he is. It never explains that until the very end. And then like the one smart thing he did was like everyone's like, oh, surely that Jedi is dead, and he's like, no, it's not. And you're like, oh
Wow.
He read the script.
Yeah, he was right about one thing. Yeah.
So I did not like that depiction. And I'm like, oh, this is why everyone loves this guy, because I watched that show and I was like, why does anyone care about this stupid blue guy? He sucks. I hate him. And I was like, oh, I get it. He's evil Sherlock Holmes, and it works. It's very effective. I mean, like the thing about Sherlock Holmes is it's like a cheat code in a character, because like it's very easy to make a character look brilliant and deduce the correct things when like you're the one writing the things. Like you can just say, yep, he was right about that. Look, and here's why. I will say the book does a pretty good job of explaining why he got to the information that he got to, except for one time. And that one time, in my opinion, is when they do the whole ship swap thing where Leia goes on to Kashyyyk, and then they're pretending that C-3PO is Leia, which is just so fucking silly.
I love it.
and like Thrawn is like watching from a distance and like deduces that entire plan just like whole cloth right there. And I was like, come on, man. Like that, yeah, you sound really clever when you picked the one thing that happened to be true out of the like infinite amount of different scenarios that it could have possibly been. That was like the one time where I felt like it Sherlocked up against the plot a little bit in a way where I was like, eh.
Yeah, I remember that point, and I was like, oh, is he going to explain to us? Like, is this actually a fun logic puzzle where he's going to explain the deduction and how anyone could have arrived at this conclusion if they were smart enough? And he's just like, yeah, there's 4 people on that ship now, go. And then that was it. Yeah, I agree. I mean, and that's just that is just the trope. I don't disagree with you. I think, not only is he Sherlock Holmes, but Paleon is Watson. It actually serves the story that we don't actually see inside Thrawn's head. We see inside Paleon's head, which allows Thrawn to remain this mysterious, scary villain throughout the whole series. I mean, that's.
I would hope that they never go in this guy's head. I hope they do.
Yeah. I can tell you that we don't. And that's great, right? And I also love that he's like always calm and composed, which contrasts with certainly like, I don't know, pretty much every other Star Wars villain. Like it's an interesting way of doing it, and it makes him kind of like admirable almost in the way that he's like truly dedicated to the Empire in a way that feels like this is just like a kind of a normal, really smart dude who's really dedicated to order. And like he honestly, the show that he fits into the best is Andor. Like you can feel you would imagine a character like this being an Imperial officer in Andor, where he's just like very soberly dedicated to the Empire and very smart and calm and ruthless, obviously. And like I think that's it's funny. I never thought of that connection until this moment, but it kind of feels like um Andor is the next place that you actually see Imperial officers acting anything close to the way Thrawn acts. Because normally they're just, scenery chewing
Yeah.
ridiculous villains.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite, I think, bit with him in this book is the very end when like the captain's like, okay, well, this is the point where we've lost now, so we throw our entire forces into this attack because that's what we do. We're the Empire. We don't want to be embarrassed by our defeat, so we're just gonna die now. And Thrawn is like, no, that's stupid. Why would I do that? That doesn't make any sense. Like
Mhm.
this was just one step in my very long plan. I still am confident that I'm ahead and we're going to pull out. And it's like, oh, that's cool. That
Yeah,
what you did just there is really cool. And it again is very character defying.
yeah, yeah. Well,
I
it
really liked
also
it.
creates a sense of more what's the word, like foreboding, where like it's nice that you do end the book on kind of an upbeat for the heroes, which gives you a sense of closure where it's like, yeah, the heroes won, they successfully defended against this sneak attack by Thrawn. But then it's great because then Thrawn is like, well, we didn't really need those ships anyway, we're still going to absolutely destroy these guys. And you're like, oh shit, really? End of book. So like it's a good hook to be like, oh, that we've only seen the outer edge of the wheels within wheels that are Thrawn's plan. And I mean, it's funny to me because I know what happens from here, and it's like virtually nothing of what happens in the later books is really shown here. I think the closest we get is like Thrawn is secretly moving some equipment off of the planet that Sabaoth was guarding, and the most the book does is it's like, just make sure to hold his attention while we move the equipment. And you're like, what? And then like
Yeah.
you probably don't even remember what I'm talking about.
No,
Um,
so what I remember is that there were like two things in the mountain that we cared about. The first was the cloaking thing, and then the other was the mysterious other
yeah,
thing
yeah.
that we don't get any information on in this book at all. And so, like, what my brain does with that is just file it away into a part of it where I will just not remember it because yeah, I don't need to. There's
Uh-huh.
nothing in this book that require other than yes, that vague thing at the end of the book where it's just like we still have the mountain, and as long as we have the mountain, we will win this war. And I'm just like, why?
Mhm.
And I mean, I agree. It's meant to be a cliffhanger. It's meant to be a to pull you into the next one. Just like Admiral Akbar being arrested for treason, which that part of it didn't work on me. I'm just like, that's ridiculous. What are we doing here?
Yeah,
I
it's
like considering how much I like Andor, the maneuverings of the Republic, the New Republic government portion of the novel is something that I just didn't care about like at all. And
yeah.
perhaps I will more in the later book. I don't know.
I think that's totally fair because I don't think they put the energy into like characterizing those people. Like all we know is
Yeah,
like it's Admiral Akbar, and it's like, okay, Admiral Akbar was never really like a character.
yeah, he was just a weird
He
fish man,
he's a fish man. He has like three
squid
lines.
man,
I don't
whatever.
have an
Yeah,
emotional connection to him. And then we have this new character who's a Bothan, I guess, which, by the way, you should care about the Bothans because many Bothans
many
died to
Bothans
bring us
died.
this information.
That's all I know about
That's
Bothans.
all
They
you
made them
should
the
know
bad
about.
guys now. So Timothy Zahn heard the line, many Bothans died to give us information. And he said, what if I make him the bad guy?
Yeah. Yeah. Wouldn't it be a fun twist? Um, yeah. And other than that, we just haven't characterized them. There's nothing like the sort of like, you know, uh, uh, character drama of Deidre or whatever in this
hmm
stuff. And it's a tiny part of the book too. So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah. Um, let's talk about Mara Jade a little bit
yeah,
here as
sure.
well. People really seem to like this character. I didn't not. Um, I I think my problem with the character was, and I told you this already, so you know this, is like there's this thing hanging in the background from the very first second we meet her, which is just she hates Luke Skywalker. She hates him. And we're like, why does she hate this guy so much? And that's like the big mystery of the book is that she just fucking wants to kill this guy. And like I felt that the reveal of the why of it was the biggest letdown of the entire novel. Like
Hmm.
I really thought we were doing something really interesting with this. I thought, I was piecing together the ideas of like Luke, you know, questioning the dark side stuff, a little bit afraid of it, like his fear of the cave again, and pondering about like what kind of Jedi he is, and what he's going to be, and all these things. And I thought, here's a character that can like represent perhaps a mistake that Luke unknowingly made in the past that hurt someone that he had no real understanding or recollection of, an error that he made. And then it's just, oh, she just worked for the Emperor.
Mm-hmm.
She just worked for the Emperor, and he killed the Emperor, so I hate him. And I was just like, man, that sucks. And maybe we'll do something more with it later. I don't know, but like in the moment, I was just like, this sucks.
Uh-huh.
I didn't enjoy it at all.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've lived with knowing who Mara Jade was for literally most of my life, so I don't think I had any real feelings about it. But I think I can understand that, especially given that it's sort of set up as being like this big interesting mystery.
Mm-hmm.
And like she just has all this hate, like you said. And I guess my problem with her character is actually maybe even like deeper, perhaps, which is like, okay, so we're told, we're told that she's this ruthless assassin who serves the Emperor in like assassination missions and subterfuge and espionage and whatever. But we don't see any of that.
Yeah.
Like based on that, you would expect like as soon as Luke comes into the room, she should just stab him in the head. Like the fact. And I think what the book is really doing is it's like it's setting things up, but it's setting them up out of order, because the truth is that she's become conflicted about this. And as you know from the spoilers that you read, she's going to become good, as my children would say. And so, that she has to progress through that conflict, but it's like, okay, but like, we didn't see any conflict, really. We didn't see any conflict in this book. We just saw somebody who we're told is this absolutely ruthless murderer not murder Luke Skywalker when she has the chance.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't really, I didn't like quite buy the I don't know, the character logic there.
This is why I was really convinced we were doing something a whole lot more complex with this reveal, because I agree with you. It's like obviously she's conflicted about these feelings, and that means in my head that perhaps these feelings are more complicated, that there's something deeper, more interesting going on here than just. I think the other thing that happens is this comes right after the moment where I don't remember all the names, but the little gray aliens that are hunting them smell Vader on Leia.
Mm-hmm.
And is like, just like, oh yes, we worked for the Emperor. And like, I think the reveal of Mara Jade like happens not too long after that. So I'm like, oh, so we have these two new things we invented in this thing, and just like, and both just worked for the Emperor. And it's just like, that's boring. Let's do something else. So yeah, I just a little disappointing. I mean, there were parts of her that like I could see are interesting. I think you said in our chats earlier this week that she's like a very like 90s badass, like I don't know the term, but like she's like the emo is not the right term, but like the dark badass but eventually lovable character.
Yeah. I forget the word too. I'm sure that I used it in our conversation, and now we're both blanking on it. But yeah, basically a very 90s archetype of the particularly female character who's going to kick ass and be sort of a Vasquez almost.
Yeah.
But also like deep down there's, she just needs the right man, who in this case is Luke Skywalker.
Just as Elektra in 2003 Daredevil, and that's perfect.
That's actually a much better referent than Vasquez, because it's like sort of a wish fulfillment character, if we're being honest. It's like it's like who, let's work backwards from what complex hottie is Luke Skywalker going to end up with, and then we fill in the blank there.
Yeah. I wonder what happened to her in The Last Jedi. Why she's not on that island with Luke.
That's another one of those points of it being a problem that Star Wars is so totally sexless, where it's like you don't even think to ask, like, so Luke just he just is a hermit now. Like, isn't like that's just sad.
Yeah.
It's
It is.
depressing.
But I mean, okay, I don't want to get into a relitigation of The Last Jedi, which is a movie I still like very, very much, and I think is one of, if not my favorite Star Wars film outside of the original trilogy. But like, my point here again is like, if you read this series, I kind of get why you hated the Luke in that movie,
Yeah.
though. Like, I get it.
Yeah.
I still think you're wrong, but I get it.
Yeah.
Because this is the guy that you wanted him to be,
Right.
and he just keep on heroing, and that's just what he does.
Yeah.
It's just going to be more hero again.
Like you feel as a kid, you feel like that's what you're promised. Like,
yeah.
Luke has become this Jedi Knight, which in 1993 means something different than it does now.
Yeah.
But he's become this Jedi Knight, and the idea that he's going to go out into the galaxy, and he's going to have all these adventures, righting wrongs and fighting the remnants of the Empire and cultivating new generation of Jedi. These all sound like amazingly fun premises for stories, and in fact, according to people who've read the EU, they often were, although it's hit or miss. And the the films just were like, okay, no, we're just going to reboot Star Wars. We're not going to, and in order to do that, we kind of have to lay low the old characters. So yeah, I've always got that. Like, I've always understood why people were disappointed. I think I forget who said it. I apologize, but earlier in the chat, somebody said that like the Han and Leia breaking up in the Disney trilogy like is more realistic. And I'm like, God, like the sad thing is that's true, but I like to imagine like it's a fantasy. Like, I'd like to imagine that Han and Leia, were able to reconcile any differences they might have, that Han was able to grow up and become an admirable, heroic person, which we basically saw him do in the third movie. And that they would stay together and have a family, and it would all be just beautiful and fun, and it would be a fun space adventure, which is what Star Wars is. And everybody always has to make everything sad and ruin everything.
Well, that's because Star Wars is melodrama. Like, that's the one thing this book does not have.
That's true.
That the original trilogy had, which is Star Wars is a whole lot of melodrama. That's why I love Return of the Jedi the most. It's not the best of the original trilogy, but it's the one I love the most because it's so melodramatic. And I think that is one thing that this book doesn't have. And I think it's a thing that like has like almost retroactively not become Star Wars. And like, by the way, I think it's a thing that The Last Jedi has a lot of. The Last Jedi has a lot of melodrama, and that's not like the problem here. And people have said it, and I don't think I've really experienced it until reading this book. Is that like Star Wars is just like so many different things to so many different people, and like the people that read this series growing up, Star Wars is one very specific thing. And by the way, I think the Star Wars that exists now in the TV shows outside of Endor is not even the Star Wars from this stuff.
Yeah.
It's the evolution of the prequel Star Wars, and that like to the people that love the prequels, like there's a lot of love for the Ahsoka type shows and the Obi, like that is an extension of that stuff. And so the people that like that stuff tend to like that as well. But like I didn't like the prequel, so that's not Star Wars to me. So if you make stuff that feels like the prequels, I'm gonna be like, I don't like this. And that's this kind of impossible to parse. It's so many things to so many different people of it all.
Yeah, I mean, it's a catch-22. Honestly, there's no movie that Disney could have made that would have really made everybody happy. I could be wrong there. I mean, but the closest you could have got. I mean, the simple advice you could have followed would have been to not. And you're going to be mad at me for saying this because you like the Last Jedi a lot, but it would have been to just leave the original trilogy characters alone entirely, and that way at least you're not pissing off people who have really strong feelings and expectations about those specific characters. And they should start over with new characters, which they sort of did, but then they had to go back and kill all the original characters.
Yeah, well, I agree, and I think The Last Jedi is a film that exists in a world where The Force Awakens happened, and so you have to kind of live in that world. But I agree. I think the central problem here is like you really can't do what this book does unless you're going to recast the characters, because all those actors are old as fuck, and you
Yeah.
can't have a Luke Skywalker running around the galaxy doing adventures when Mark Hamill's an old dude. He can't do that anymore.
No.
Like, I just watched the new Indiana Jones movie. You don't want to do that. Harrison Ford is an old man now. You don't want to do that. Trust me, that movie is awful.
Uh-huh.
And so like they wanted this situation where like they had to put the characters in a place where they're kind of removed from the board, and also kind of sort of not the main focus of the story, but also kind of the main focus of the story. And I think like also like when you pick up from the Force Awakens into the Last Jedi, it's like, okay, we've established that Luke is like hiding on some island planet somewhere, and it's like as a writer you're like, okay, why? And you have to work from there, right? So like I don't know, man. I like it's all it's all complex. I think you're absolutely right that the best thing would have done is to just not completely mine the nostalgia of this thing and just move on. I still in my mind have this idea of what I thought the Disney trilogy was supposed to be, which is that the first movie is like a love letter to the old characters. The second movie serves as like a transition where those characters are almost quite literally passing the torch on to the new characters. And then the third movie is just new characters, new adventure, new problem. Like just like we move on. And I still feel like there's bits and pieces of, you could see that that's what they wanted it to be, and then the ninth movie fucked it all up. But
Yeah. Right. It doesn't even seem like it should be that hard for them to fix this if you just get down to the brass tacks of storytelling and just kind of, I don't know. Like they could just make another movie and just be like, let's just make this one good and not worry about like what point we're making or in context of the greater Star Wars universe. I don't mean like they shouldn't try to make a point. That's not
yeah,
what I mean.
yeah,
I just mean like just be free your mind,
yeah,
um
yeah. I
and
mean,
have fun.
I think this is a good book, and like it's cool that this thing got to exist, and people like got to enjoy all this, and that it is. Like I feel like this is, if we're gonna keep making Star Wars films, this is honestly this is the type of stuff we need to leave behind though. Like I do like, it was great, cool, more adventures of Luke, but like let's do some other stuff. And I think again my favorite parts of this book is when I feel like we're doing other stuff. We haven't really talked about Card yet very much.
Yeah.
I think he's cool too. I'm really into this guy. This guy that's like genuinely just trying to exist in his own shit, and dealing with these two sides of this fight, not really having one political allegiance to one or the other, but like clearly having some sense of morality. Like that stuff worked. It worked for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's sort of taking the idea of Jabba the Hutt, but making him like an admirable, thoughtful leader who is conflicted about,
Yeah.
How to do right by his own internal compass, not necessarily, conventional standards of morality, but he has some code that he lives by. That's
Mm-hmm.
a compelling type of character. I liked that, honestly. I like, despite the fact that Talon Card is the most try-hard 90s name ever. It's I think I may have even rolled my eyes at that when I was a child, to be honest. But
I love the two R's.
the
I
two
love
R's,
the two R's.
and the fact that, I mean, it's Talon Card, right? It's like okay. But yeah, he ends up being a likable character. I agree.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I feel like we're getting to the end of this conversation now, but like, do you have anything else you really wanted to make sure we cover here?
Well, yeah, I mean, not super important. I remember the Nogri, the little gray alien guys, as you called them, being something that stuck with me for a long time as like a story element and like an interesting and fun alien race. We just don't actually see much of them at all in this book, so I don't think there's much to say other than just like,
Yeah.
they now it's sort of a trope of the idea of like, the assassin alien race, I guess. It's funny, I can't think of where else I've seen it though. I say that and I don't, like, I can't actually think of another example, but it was but I remember them sticking with me for a long time. That's one of the elements of the story that really stuck with me is the Nogri. Um, the I still think the Islamari as like a a way of cutting around the Force just being OP is I know you don't like it, but I thought it was like okay, sure, fine. Like I see why you did that, Zahn.
Yeah, no. To be clear, I do see why. I see the need for it. I just think it's a little silly as well. Like, there is definitely like a, if you're going to make this science fiction, then you have to deal with the fact that these Jedi are basically gods, and like are really ridiculously hard to kill unless you're just going to put them up against Sith the
Yeah,
whole time. And like this story did not want to do that yet. It did not, and it's presumably there's going to be dark Jedi that we're going to fight in the future, and probably lightsaber battles, but this book did not want to do that. And so how do you solve that problem? You have to strip him of his power. How do you do that? You need to invent something that strips a Jedi of their power. It's as elegant as a solution
yeah,
that you could possibly come up with. Like you could either do it, biological or mechanical,
yeah.
and it would be just as silly if someone was like, well, here's a device I have that
Right.
when I wear it, I have a force shield
Yeah.
on.
Well, so I'll explain why. Okay, this is gonna be my like closing comment because it actually ties a few things together. So, like seriously, so I talked about how I kind of liked that it was kind of sci-fi, and kind of tried to take things seriously and think them through in a way that is unusual now. Um, so and this is going to be a mild spoiler for you, Scott. Are you okay with that?
I'm fine.
Um, I didn't get a yes. Did you say?
I said I'm fine. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't
Yeah.
hear you. Sorry. So we later find out, or maybe it was in this book and I just forgot, but we later find out that the creatures, that the predator creatures on the planet, are force sensitive, and they hunt by using the force. And the Islamari evolved to block the force. And to me, I like, even as a kid, I remember being like, "That's so fun," because like the force is an energy field tied to life. It's an energy field that surrounds us and binds us and permeates all life, and that's why Dagobah is full of it. So like the point is, the force is intrinsically tied to life. That's already in the source material. And then he said, well, like what if we had an animal that could use the force actively, and then another animal would have to use the force to like evade predation, and you'd have this stalemate, and then we can use that as a plot element. And it's like, wow, this is like taking the force, which is really a fantasy concept. It's a fantastical concept with no grounding in science at all, and it's making it just a little sciencey, not midi-chlorian shit level, but like it's because like I personally think there's a difference between saying it's midi-chlorians, it's how many midi-chlorians you have, and the idea that it's just like, oh, it's tied to life, and you can imagine that life would have some interactions with it that could be useful. Like that to me is a cool and creative application of like a creative twist on the force, which is the kind of thing that I appreciate about this book.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why this is the best piece of Star Wars fiction since 1986 or whatever.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's silly, but it's certainly less silly than midichlorians. I think one thing we've learned is just how much George Lucas completely failed to understand the thing that he created.
Uh-huh.
That's one thing the prequel trilogy continues to show for me. I saw a video today that was like, he gave Yoda a lightsaber. It's like, how little of your own stuff do you have to understand when you throw a lightsaber into Yoda's hand? You clearly don't understand the thing that you wrote.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, no, and I think, to this book's credit, I think it understands it a bit more than Lucas himself did. So
Yes, I agree with that.
mm-hmm. Yeah. So Bishop asks if we want to do a mini review of Ahsoka. I mean, Matt hasn't watched the show. I think he watched like the first episode and bounced, right?
Yep.
So we can't really collectively do that, but I just didn't think it was that good of a show. I think one of my biggest problems with the show was that it was trying very hard to be a sequel while also being a new thing at the same time, and I think it alienated both groups of people by doing that, because I had no idea who any of these characters were, and I thought the the show did a very bad job of making me care about who they were and why. And then I think like I said, I already talked about why the Thrawn stuff just didn't work on me at all. It just
Mhm.
had there was no drama behind it. Like I think there's literally a throwaway line at the end of the show where Thrawn is talking to Ahsoka, and it's like, it's a shame we never got to meet face to face. And I'm like, yes, that's the problem. You can't have your antagonist and your protagonist just never speak to each other through however many episodes. Like I didn't think the show worked very well. I didn't like it. A lot of people like it. I think people that like if you were really into the cartoons, the Rebels and stuff, like you recognize these characters, and it was probably similar to how this book was for you the first time you read it after watching the movies. I think that makes sense, but it just did very little for me. Did not care for it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I only saw the first episode, but it didn't seem to be making any effort at all to really kind of welcome new people who weren't already familiar with these characters. Just
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of sort of tedium where it's like, maybe if I cared about this character, I would care what was happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
But you're kind of doing this in the reverse order show. So no,
Yeah.
there was kind of nothing there for me. So I bounced.
Yeah, and I never finished season 3 of The Mandalorian. I think I watched the first episode of Boba Fett and said, nope, that's it for me. So I mean, Andor is really the only Star Wars thing I've genuinely enjoyed.
Yeah.
I guess this is on the list now because I did genuinely enjoy this book, certainly more than those other shows. So
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I was joking. This is the best thing since Jedi, because Andor is actually the best thing since Jedi. So
I love that show. It's not coming back this year, by the way.
yeah,
It's going to be 2025, unfortunately.
I actually have just like emotionally come to my own peace with the idea that maybe we don't get any more Andor, and I'm just like, that's fine, because we got like this perfect season that really leaves you with the feeling of resolution, and we kind of already know what's going to happen to the characters anyway.
True. Yeah.
So I would not be totally heartbroken if there wasn't any more Andor. I'm saying this because I'm like preparing myself for this disappointment, which I feel is coming, which is that they're going to kill the only good Star Wars thing that they have.
As of right now, January 5th, 2024, it is being worked on and it is going to come out in 2025. So that you're right, that could change. It could change at any minute. The streaming industry is very volatile right now. Disney is not making a lot of money and has basically made it clear that they are willing to sell a lot of the stuff that they have. So anything could happen, but as of right now, it's still coming.
All right.
All right, folks. Anything else? Anyone else wanted to talk about Star Wars? I am about to close the poll for next month as well. So if you haven't voted, let me share that link one more time. Just give you folks a chance at the very end here, if you showed up late, to vote, and we'll tally the results. What I mean, outside of this series, you said you read a couple other Star Wars books. I guess you read Shadows of the Empire, right?
I read Shadows of the
it?
Empire. I read one that I don't remember the name of it, but it was where they went to the spice mines of Kessel.
You got to go to the spice mines, man.
Gotta go to the spice mines. Oh, by the way, it turns out in that book that the spice is almost exactly the spice melange from Dune. And furthermore,
Of course it is.
that it is mined from inside this planet where there are giant worms. And even as a kid, man. I was like, no, you can't do that. I think that might have been the first sort of like crack in my sense of Star Wars as like a sanctified thing that had a reality to it, where I was like, you son of a bitch, you just overtly ripped off. Like it's fine for there to be like a reference, but this is just literally Dune.
That's great. How do they get away with it?
I don't know.
No, that's wonderful. Yeah, I mean, I think my interaction with Star Wars was always kind of video game based. I did the Jedi Knight, Jedi Outcast games. The one that like it's a first person shooter until your character gets a lightsaber and then you go third person and just start like fucking people up. That was a lot of fun. I liked that game.
I don't know if I played hardly any of these. I played whatever one was the FPS, and that was fun. Yeah.
Dark Forces was the big ones in the 90s when we were kids,
Uh,
right?
yeah, and then of course there's all the X-wing versus Tie Fighter stuff, which is almost like
Mhm.
a my brain puts it in a whole different pocket, but
Yeah.
it was pretty great at the time. Yeah.
And then the newest games are the ones that are kind of they're Souls-esque.
Mm. Hmm.
I forget what those are called. I played the first one. The second one came out this year. I haven't played it yet. It was all right. It's all right.
Cool.
Yeah. I don't know why I can't just like make really good Star Wars games like all the time. Like just
Yeah.
all the time.
Well, it always amuses me. I never played any of the games with Star Killer. Did you ever play those?
No.
So like it always amuses me because the character in those games does stuff like pulls a Star Destroyer out of orbit using the Force.
Oh, that's the Force Unleashed ones,
Force
right?
Unleashed ones, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
it's funny to me because I'm like, of course, you want to do all this stuff with the Force, and it's fine that you make a game around it, but then people get so bent out of shape about the idea of like fitting it into the canon, and I'm like, no, this is not like you can't have that also be in the same universe as Luke Skywalker. That's just preposterous. But
Yeah, yeah. Slifer Jam, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, says like with the multiverse stuff lately, I'm surprised Disney doesn't split off the Star Wars universes and have multiple canons going on simultaneously. I think that's what you're talking about.
yeah,
But I think there's this really interesting thing where like the Marvel MCUification of everything almost says not to do that. Like if we want to copy that formula, it's like no, these things actually have to all be interconnected. We have to do it that way. We can't just have things go off and exist on their own in their own universe. Like that doesn't work according to this popular theory that is wrong. I think.
I think it's wrong too because it's kind of hard for my brain to accept that like Thor Ragnarok is in the same universe as um uh Infinity War, even though one literally leads into the next, just because of the tonal whiplash is so severe. So it's like, yeah,
Sure.
I think you can be kind of wild with it, and people will just shrug. It's fine. I don't
Yeah, I
care.
mean, like we existed in a world before this MCU stuff where a new Batman movie came out every couple years, and it supposedly took place within the same thing, but looked completely different. And also, the actor that played Batman was different every time,
Yeah,
and everyone just goes, "Yeah, okay, I
yeah,
don't care." It's only very recently like this consistency with like casting, like it has to be, we have to get the same people. It's the most we're going to spend millions and millions and millions of dollars giving Robert Downey Jr. money because we can't possibly ever recast any of these characters. That's a very recent thing in this whole
yeah,
blockbuster filmmaking thing. So
yeah. You're right.
yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Stop doing CGI Luke Skywalker in your Star Wars shows. Just cast someone to play Luke Skywalker. It doesn't matter. This is, by the way, I will continue to go back to this. Like the best thing Mike Flanagan did in the movie Doctor Sleep was just say, "We're not fucking doing the CGI Jack Nicholson. We're just gonna cast someone to play Jack in that movie, and that's gonna be fine because we'll dress him like Jack and we'll signal with the power of movie language to
Uh huh.
the viewers that he's just supposed to be Jack Torrance, and everyone will just get it
Yeah,
because we're not stupid."
it's a movie.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
All right, I think we are ready to close the poll down and calculating, tabulating, very official, very formal. Um, okay, the Ferryman by Justin Cronin wins
yay,
by a lot, actually.
nice.
Yeah. So I don't know how many Justin Cronin books you've read, Matt. Have you
None,
read any?
zero.
So I read he had a trilogy called The Passage
Okay,
that came out 10 years ago or so. It was a 3-book trilogy that got adapted into a very short-lived network TV show that had I think Zach from Saved by the Bell as the lead. um, I never watched it. I heard it got pretty bad reviews. I enjoyed the series. I didn't love it. I liked it a lot. But this movie just came out this year, I think, The Ferryman, and I've heard good things. So I was pretty excited to check it out. Saw it got nominated, and it looks like we're reading it next month. So
and this has no relation to The Fisherman, which we also just read.
no, very close, but not at
But
all.
no, nothing, not even close. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so that will be I think we're gonna go once again the first Friday of the month, so it'll be February 2nd. Yep, February 2nd. We'll be back here on YouTube to chat about Justin Cronin's The Ferryman. So we'll be making a formal post and put that up everywhere if you need to be reminded of it. But oh, that is Groundhog Day. Nice.
Perfect.
You can also watch Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
So that's gonna be fun. I'm looking forward to that. And if you're disappointed that The Ferryman beat your book, well, you gotta become a patron and vote in the poll next time.
That's right. You got to show up. Thanks for showing up, everybody, by the way.
Yeah, no, this was a great turnout. Thank you all so much. I know there's a lot of you that really, really love this book, and I was actually kind of terrified that I would come in and ruin your Friday night. I hope we were fair, and we didn't make you hate us, while also still communicated the parts of it that we didn't really love. So I hope so.
Yeah, I think we were fair and balanced.
Yeah. Just like our news station of choice.
Just like our news station, just like our heroes, yeah. All right. And with that.
Yeah. Thanks so much, everyone. Matt, go to the outro now.
If you like what we do here at Doof Media and you want to see more of it, then please head on over to our Patreon at patreon.com/Doof Media and consider donating to support our organization. At any available level, you'll get access to the ability to vote for the books that we talk about each month, as well as a bunch of other exclusive features. So go check that out.
Yeah, we have a new bonus show coming out next week where we're going to be taking a look at Castle Rock, the Hulu original anthology series roughly based on Stephen King's Town. So that begins next week. So if you want to check that out, make sure you subscribe on Patreon. Yeah, that's going to do it for us. Questions, comments, or just want to reach out to us and tell us why we're wrong about The Last Jedi, you can find us. Just DM those to Matt, directly to him.
And my account is trash at. Yeah.
No, you can find us on Twitter, X at Doof Media. Email us at doofmedia@gmail.com, or head over to the subreddit r/Doof Media, where you can chat about anything you want related to the stuff we talk about or other stuff. I don't know. You want to talk about The Boys? That's coming back this year.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of fun TV shows coming back this year. I think the second season of Severance is coming this year.
Nice. Invincible, is Invincible already out, or is it just coming out?
It's out. I don't think they did the whole season. They did like a half season thing, and then there are more coming out later. I don't know.
Okay, cool.
But Arcane is coming back.
Yeah, I need to watch the latest episode of Reacher, actually.
Yeah, me too. I haven't seen any Reacher.
I'm totally caught up except for this last episode. Nobody spoil it.
I'm gonna go watch it. Go watch it.
It's fun.
Yeah. All right, folks, that's going to do it. Have a good rest of your weekend, a good month, and hopefully we'll see you on February 2nd to chat about Justin Cronin's The Ferryman. See you later.
Bye.